Hello and welcome back live, Build 2014, San Francisco. I am so excited with my esteemed panel. I'm Dan Fernandez. This is all about what's new with Azure, an interactive session, so send us your questions, channel9mcn.com, type in your questions, let us know, and why don't we just start and do quick intros.
Sure. So I'm Paul Yuknovich. I'm the Group Program Manager for the Azure Tools Group. And I brought some friends.
Yeah, I'm David Tessar. I'm a technical evangelist at Microsoft. Been focused on Windows Azure for quite a while for the enterprise IT type audience. So,
Mark Sims. I'm with the Azure Customer Advisory team, and we build a lot of big stuff on Azure.
Yep.
Awesome, awesome. So, feel free to send us your questions, but just to kind of start off, Paul, Mark, you guys had some sessions. What were you covering today? There's so much new stuff. So I think Guthrie said 44,
Like 44, we were probably up north of 30 of those, but yeah, it's pretty cool. So, we talked about the tools of the SDK, so it's pretty much everything, which went from tools for IaaS, like you saw the create VM work, the ability to create dev test environments, moving over to all the website work. There's some good stuff there. You could publish easily now to VMs to websites. We turn on web deploy. Just lots of cool stuff. I'm going to forget, but that's why you're here. You're going to remind me.
Yeah, exactly. Too. No, there's a ton of stuff too. So, and Mark, you actually had two sessions. Yeah. And talk about kind of what your role is and why your sessions are crazy good.
I don't know if we'll go crazy good, but we'll go good.
Or why do you rock, Mark?
Is that with a C or a K?
Well, that's one of the questions. With a C.
With a C.
That's
okay.
important.
So I did two sessions. One was on we deal with about 400 or 500 big Azure projects every year, and we go through the same things. How do you make them big? How do you keep the lights on? How do you know if it's running? And the first one was kind of breaking it down, going, how do you look at an architecture end to end? How do you tease apart the points where these big, fascinating distributed systems will fail, and make design choices that are appropriate for a system where you don't know how many people are going to show up at your front door in the morning. Unlike most kind of on-premise enterprise systems where if I have 100,000 folks one day and 105 the next, I went on a hiring binge. If I'm a kind of internet-facing, cloud-scale, Internet of Things style app, and I only added 5,000 new users in a day, my investors are looking at me funny. So there's a lot of new patterns, there's a lot of new approaches, and there's some new ways to build software. And the second one was on suitably anonymized stack of here's all the really great-looking but horrendously questionable code that we've seen in the last couple of years. Sort of anti-patterns on display, as well as how to flip them around and kind of take what stuff that looks perfectly innocuous until you're amazingly successful, and then turn it into something that's a little bit more resilient, leveraging a lot of the great new language features in .NET 4.5 and in the underlying SDKs.
So what's a good example of code that, wow, that code looks fine, what's wrong with it? It's just doing a quick async call or something like, what's a canonical example where you're like, wow, don't do that?
So let's take the beloved three-tier architecture. I've got my web stuff, I've got my app stuff, and I've got a database. We've built some amazing stuff using that pattern in the last 15 years. You take it out to the cloud, and all of a sudden, some of the physics change. Because really, the cloud is just, how do we trade physics for economics? How do we get the economics that matter with a different set of physics? So even if I think about, the reason I would used to split these up is I'd have my web stuff out in that nasty world called the internet, I'd have my app stuff hidden behind a firewall, and I'd have my data stuff locked in a vault somewhere. Well, because of the way the Azure security model works, you get that first boundary around your entire cloud service. So if I've got two different sets of VMs, some hosting some web code, some hosting some business logic, I'm kind of like taking a bag of money, putting it on the table, and lighting it on fire.
A bag of money, and you're just lighting it on fire.
It on fire.
Really good Kindle.
That is a great quote.
Because you're spending the time to take some state from one machine, serialize it into a binary array, run it through the entire network stack, out on the wire, and back up onto another machine, when you could have just passed a pointer. Yeah. So when we're doing CapEx, when we're buying servers for what we need from 3 years from now, it's background noise, nobody notices. When I have the ability to tune how much capacity I have deployed on an hour-by-hour basis, then all these things start to jump out, and I am burning money.
Okay, cool. And remember, we are taking questions. We actually have our first question here. Joe asks, when will the new portal be available on Azure Pack? So which of you wants to take that?
Dave. That'd be up my alley. Well, we definitely don't have any announcements for timing or anything like that, even related to it going on to the Azure Pack. But naturally, that scenario is something that Microsoft is looking into and makes logical sense, right? You look at something like the resource group model that we have and how that has a JSON format to deploy your infrastructure. That would be really handy, of course, to deploy across the CloudOS story on-prem and hosters and things like that. So, yeah.
So, and for people who don't know what Azure Pack is, because you find a lot of people going, I just assume Azure's a cloud, maybe just kind of level set real quick.
Yeah, sure, yeah. It is sometimes a little confusing for folks. The Azure Pack is something that runs on top of all of System Center. And when you run the Azure Pack on top of System Center, it has a general look and feel like Windows Azure, at least the current Azure Management Portal, not the future one.
Right.
So when you look, even though it's running all on-premise hardware, you could deploy VMs, websites, other things like that. When you're on the console, it looks, feels like it, but it's not in Azure.
So if you're on-premise and you want that capability, you basically install Azure Pack and you get it.
Yeah, you install it, and System Center is the foundation, so it kind of sits on top of that.
Sure.
But yeah, we have like the PDT is a great tool that will automatically deploy all of the System Center environment and Azure Pack if you want. Makes it a lot easier for you. But yeah, it runs just on top of that.
That gives you more choices and more portability between on-prem and cloud.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Most definitely.
Okay.
So some more questions here. I'll take the next one from Kevin Jensen. What are some of the big things on the Azure mobile horizon?
Oh, I'd almost ask you that, Dan, but can I do that?
Yeah, you can.
What are some of the big things?
Well, we're not going to talk about them. No, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
In fact, Miranda Luna and Yavor and a bunch of folks did some training before Build, talking about some of the new and unique ways that you can use Azure Mobile Services.
Yep.
And probably one of the most interesting examples was using it for ads targeting and retargeting, right? Where you can actually know a person's location in your application and do like the dream of you're passing by Target and you get an offer for a 99-cent Gatorade or something because the temperature is over 90 degrees, right? Like those kinds of things that you can really be think about new business models and new ways to target customers from an advertising perspective. And it's not so much a technology problem as what are the right scenarios and how do you make that happen, and then how do you make that scale? So some of the examples that we were talking about was Sochi, where they're sending out results, and that's it, probably in the millions and millions. And I don't know if you got involved in that one as well.
Yeah, I was one of the consulting architects for that one. So yeah, it's really impressive some of the scale that we've been able to achieve with kind of the right designs, the right patterns on Azure, going out to, can't remember the exact number, but when we're measuring users starting in numbers of millions, we've got some fun stuff to play with. And as kind of more of the things we've learned about how to build at scale make their way into the default experiences and things like mobile services, recent support for C#, a lot of great patterns there. These things will get out of the realm of kind of rocket surgery and more into it's just kind of there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really love about mobile services now too, is you could have an existing backend, like a web API, web service. You could write a very thin mobile service on top of it, and then you've got the identity support, you get the notification support, you can use the storage. So it's not like a complete lift and shift mentality. You can actually add that capability to your existing services.
Yeah,
so
and
you guys should check that out.
Obviously, for folks who didn't see, we did add .NET Mobile Services. So previously, if you were a mobile services developer, you were writing in JavaScript. Now you get full support. You can file new Azure Mobile Service Project. We showed that today. You get the ability to do browse notifications and test notifications, and a really just nice integrated experience. Everything you know and love about Visual Studio as a .NET developer, you get from mobile services.
Notification Hub.
Yeah,
that's really slick. So at massive scale, we have a service now that can handle that. It can handle multiple devices. You can format with templates, what kind of notifications you want. You can use tagging, so you can isolate where you want notifications to go. Yeah, VS, the VS point of view is not, let's do every aspect of managing it. It's more about how do we help you troubleshoot. So we added this test send feature, and eventually we want to actually help you browse all registrations. But it just makes it easy. You don't have to write a whole test client. You just use the tooling, off you go.
Exactly. So some more questions here. Wolf asks, the new portal.azure.com and the automation portion of manage.windowsazure.com both look extremely useful. When is the official release of both, aka no longer on preview? This is probably a question for like almost Mohit, I'd say.
Yeah, I can't say. I don't even know. So
Yeah?
Yeah, just to comment on that, I mean, if you go to the edge.technet.com, the shameless plug of the Edge show, there is some interviews with program managers on the automation portal, and as well as the Windows Azure pack, so you can learn some more information about that. But it's another scenario where you can see us having that unique Cloud OS story of having the on-premise similar or the same functionality as what you would expect in the cloud. So Azure Automation Service now in Windows Azure only, as well as having the Azure Automation Service on-premise with the System Center products. So,
yep, very cool. Now Ben asks, when Azure will be financially attractive for small startups without big investors, without big money bags, it's very, very hard to calculate the upcoming costs. Now you've talked about burning money already. What are some of the ways that you make this? Because I do see a lot of customers and startups, they're making the same investments in AWS. Right, just hosted on VMs for websites. So what do you think the story is for startups?
So this is a really interesting transition, because when we build out servers, it's very easy to predict the cost. I need this much capacity, I go to my, your favorite servervendor.com, click a button, wait a few weeks, stand it up, and other than keeping the electricity on, it's pretty much fixed. But that really starts to break down when I become successful, and all of a sudden I need more or less capacity. So I think it's indicative of we're moving from a world of very predictable load and very predictable supply to a world of very unpredictable demand, and then having the financial models and the technical models to be able to keep up with that. And honestly, this is kind of across the entire industry going. So back when I was designing embedded circuitry and kind of electrical engineering, everything had a budget. We had power budgets, we had current budgets, we had dollar budgets and everything. And for some really cool reasons, we have an entire generation of software development that was like, the hardware is someone else's problem, the economics are someone else's problem. That's starting to come back to roost. I think it's kind of neat. It helps us be better software engineers. But a lot of what we've seen has been a combination of, okay, not only going to instrument and design my code for performance and scale, but I'm also going to understand the economics and the bounds that goes, hey, if I'm working against a resource that's metered and I'm paying per message or per this or per that, I'm going to cap it. At some point I'm going to say, I do not want to pay more underlying I want to pay the underlying platform more, I want to cut users off, or I want to let it float. The great thing about something like Azure is you can choose to let it float as opposed to have to turn people away because you didn't have enough capacity. As we improve things like auto-scaling, as App Insights comes online with more features, I think it'll be a lot easier to be able to do kind of small-scale testing, understand what the economic impact of running a service for a given load is, and then continually tune and tweak that.
Yeah, and obviously with the new portal that's there, there's the nice billing. If you have a resource group, it'll tell you the cost of that particular app with all the resources together. So new enhancements to help out in that space too. Right?
And that'll be really help kind of close that loop of I run a small scale site, I do a little bit of load testing, which things like the Elastic Load Service make really easy. Then I go, all right, to support 100 users for an hour costs me X. I either need to optimize my code, or actually I feel pretty good about that. Let's roll.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing is just from the, how do you test the waters? Like the fact that we have 10 free websites for customers that they can easily sign up and just play with stuff and do the evaluation part, that there's no economic cost to start. Right.
And for startups, programs like BizSpark are extremely attractive and come with, I believe they come with some Azure capacity.
Some Azure compute dollars that you can basically use.
Yeah. So next question. With websites, Azure provides staging functionality. Is there such a thing for Azure SQL? How do you manage staging and production environments of SQL tied to staging and production websites?
Yeah, I mean, that's really good feedback. That's something, I mean, it strictly isn't there right now, but what I see people do, you have multiple instances of databases, kind of like we do on-premise, right? You have your test data. Sometimes you have your read-only data too, so that data's flowing down and code's floating up, which is kind of a best practice. And then the tooling, we have multiple environments in mind, so you have configurations, here's where I push for dev and test, here's where I push for staging, here's where I push for prod. So that'll let you, in your front-end tiers, kind of manage which database connections you're talking to. So that's, it's not exactly what you're asking for, but it's a stepping stone towards that.
This is one where we actually had a discussion that said, because right now, if you're using PaaS, you have a cloud service and a database. It's in staging, everything's working well. You're burning in that web config pointer to, say, the production. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a transform when I do this change from staging to production, that one connection string or that one set of secrets could change, so the staging database is really just for us to look at, and then production. And that's one of the things, I mean, at least we've talked about a feature that I think would address that
Yeah,
too.
we've talked about environments and even environment variables, which is another way you can protect yourself. So as you switch to a different environment, you look up, hey, what's my database for this environment? And then your code's a little bit more durable. Right?
On the IT infrastructure DevOps kind of side of things too, right? There's quite a few ways to deploy an automated deployment of a website and a database. So if you want to spin up a new instance and tear it down, and even automate this spin up and tear down of a new environment, that could be one way to possibly deal with that.
With PowerShell, that's great today, and now you're seeing with the Azure Resource Manager, that'll make it really nice for a whole topology, including a database. Right?
Do you want to talk about how PowerShell inside Visual Studio, every time you file new? Go for it.
Yeah, so it's just one little thing we did, but we recognize, hey, after you build an app, you need a place to do dev and test, so we just add the gate. We give you a dev test environment, either with an Azure website, or if you need more control over the OS, you can use a virtual machine, which is also good for like a lift and shift kind of a scenario. So we give you that, and then we give you the PowerShell that basically automates the pushing and even provisioning of the resources that you need. We understand different environments, so you have different configs based on JSON for each environment. So it's a great starting point, and that'll
Rather than you having to say learn all the different PowerShell, it's your starter script to automatically deploy.
Exactly, and it's your code, so you can totally customize, exactly what you're doing, what you're provisioning, even what's on the VM. So
Definitely important also to make sure you check out the Windows Azure Script Center, because there's quite a few scripts that are out there that deploy a lot of really common scenarios. You have a website and a database, there's already a template there for that, for instance. You just plug in your variables, and then there you go.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is even a Script Center thing that we formalized, and we point off to more examples. So it's a great ecosystem, I agree.
Yeah, actually, we just did release our resource group ones. A version of our scripts that basically work with resource group deployments, which we got to show off and actually worked.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
We were all as surprised.
Thanks, team.
Yeah, exactly. So more questions. John, any plans for a virtual router like Viata in Azure? David, I'm looking at you.
I don't think there's any new announcements there, but there is the dynamic routing capabilities we have, and we also have Express Route, which is a great way to connect up to MPLS networks and have that extension to your network. I think we have quite a few options today. You've got the point to site, you've got the site-to-site VPN, the dynamic routing, the Express Route. I think those are all the ones off the top of my head that we have. So a lot of options already, but nothing new past that we have to announce there. Yeah.
So Heaven's Revenge, fascinating name. Will
I better
there
be really careful then with my answer.
Will there be some kind of hybrid Visual Studio plus Server Manager, considering the recent overlap for deployment? That's an interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So honestly, we're thinking about it. As you can see, we've added a lot of Server Manager style functionality into Visual Studio, like in places like Server Explorer and Publish, File New. We're also seeing a lot of investment in the portal, also in Server Manager, and there is some overlap. Like definitely in VS, we care about what the dev really cares about day in, day out.
Exactly. The regular management and monitoring, that's great to have at something like a portal.
Definitely. So I'm going to take liberties to do things that are best for devs and dev diagnostics in Visual Studio. But we are going to look for those hybrid opportunities for things that totally do overlap, so that you just get more functionality in VS without having to leave. So we're looking at it.
This is a great question where it says, hey, DevOps, hey, you dev guy, work with your IT guy, because I bet you he probably has some tools to help you, and you guys should work together to make a better scenario, right?
Even like having the scripts checked in, I think, is a cool step in that direction, right? So. You check in what you think from the dev side, the ops and DevOps folks can look at that and make it kind of real for their environment. So you're seeing more of that come together. So I'd say, yes, we're going that direction. Yep.
Okay. Let's see, Neil G asks, is the lag in updates for the Azure Trust Center and Office 365 Trust Center due to legal team delays or just lack of customer voice? I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, that's maybe for another group.
Yeah. The announcements for that, right? I mean, we are, the Scott Goo blog seems to be the typical one there. Yep. We definitely on the Edge show we cover those announcements too, because it relates to our IT and the enterprise environments. But as far as why they're not in the website, who knows?
Yeah, you'd have to ask them, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So Peter asks, are you thinking about some automation deployment tools on Azure to run Mono on Linux? So there's likely some scripts, I'm sure, in Script Center to pick a Linux VM of some sort, CentOS or one of the...
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff out there to automate Linux stuff. I'm not sure I'm not a Linux guy, so I don't know what Mono is in particular, but...
Mono is more the equivalent of the .NET framework, but it runs on Linux.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, but I mean, you can today automate the creation of Linux VMs, right? Because we've got Linux VMs in a gallery, right, from our open source community. So you could even submit a VM, a gallery image with Mono on whatever Linux distribution you wanted as a submission, right? And then you could run that as a template if you wanted. So
yeah. So the idea there is you're basically building like the one image that you would use, and then people can kind of reuse that.
Right.
The equivalent of a sysprep.
Right. Yeah. Windows Azure, you can, of course, we support various flavors of Linux. You can create your own custom image, which is just unique to your own subscriptions and deployments. And then there's, of course, the community pool of resources with Linux images already pre-created.
What is the name of the OpenTech one where there's an OpenTech helps do some Linux images or basically open source images? Anybody remember?
Yeah, the community image portal. I can't remember the
URL
right
it's
now.
It's a little tricky because it is in a slightly different spot. It's not the new gallery VM image section because it's a whole other open source section of the console, but I can't think of it off the top of my head where it's at in the application.
Because for all we know, there could be an image that already
has it. There could be
on this, and if there isn't, submit it on there because I'm sure a lot of customers would want. Next question. These are great questions. Scott asks, are there any advantages for cache service preview versus in-roll cache?
I can take this one. Or
Either
you
one.
want to do it, Mark? Yeah, so in-roll cache, you're basically in your cloud service boundary. You're deploying your own cache service for yourself, right? And that's great inside of a cloud service and all the roles that you have. One of the top requests we got was, what about websites? What about other loosely coupled things that need cache? And so the cache service can service like a wide variety of loosely coupled tiers of an application. I think it's super helpful for that.
Okay.
And the data in the cache will stay there between, say, resets or teardowns of individual cloud services, and that way you can share the cache between not just websites and kind of other and mobile services, but also between different multiple cloud services.
Yep.
Especially if you had some common reference data or some common lookup data, and you didn't want each service to have to maintain their own copy.
Yep.
Cool. All right, we got some more questions going on here. Just a few more minutes. Andrew asks, how to learn and play with Azure in the cost-free sandbox. So, I mean, we talked about the free websites, but when do you all want to take that?
Well, just a couple quick ideas. I mean, there's the Express edition, the Web Express. Get that along with a free trial. You can create the dev test environments, do everything you saw in the keynote. So that's super great way to do it.
10 free websites.
Yep, 10 free websites.
And that's probably the easiest way to get started, and it's free.
Yep.
And then for learning, obviously Channel 9.
Yep.
There's a ton of content for developers to get started for free.
Microsoft Virtual Academy is another great place. There's a lot of free courses up there for devs and for IT folks that are out there. And then also, surprisingly, some people still don't realize that if you have an MSDN subscription, you actually get a monetary credit for Azure. So, if you're out there and maybe you don't personally have one, start asking around maybe within your company and say, hey, do you know anybody who has an MSDN subscription? Because it's very possible that person doesn't realize that they get free Azure credits, right, with their subscription.
That's a really good deal. You get several $100 US dollars.
I think it's up to $150 a month.
Yep. So you could have a VM running, like one of those basic VMs running for a while with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tiago Costa asks, when is Azure Virtual Machines for VHDX and Gen 2 support will be available, even in preview?
That's a really common question we get asked. So believe me, you're not the first person that asked that. We don't have anything to announce at this time, but what I will say is that all of Windows Azure is running on top of Windows Server 2012, which does support VHDX, but there's a lot of tooling things that have to happen under the hood to make that happen. So no announcements yet, but it's something we're well aware of as a request.
Okay.
Yeah.
And looks like we're running out of time, so let's do one last question. What's the story with Azure Cloud Services? Is there still any work going on there?
Yeah, I'll take that. So there's absolutely a lot of work going on there. There's so many new kids on the block, I guess, to talk about this week that you probably heard a little bit about the new kids. But, I mean, we showed native interactive remote debugging for cloud services.
Coolest feature ever.
Yeah, so it's at this point, we're kind of in the V3, V4, right? We're in that level of features of advanced diagnostics,
Right.
doing things there. So I'd love to hear what you guys think we need to add, but we're clearly investing in cloud services. Yep.
Great. So, you know, just to kind of wrap up, where do we point people to? So we obviously had that for the SDK. We have the user voice.
Yep. And the Azure site.
Yes.
Azure.microsoft.com. Yep.
David, Mark, sites to point people to.
I'll point back again to the Edge show, edge.technet.com. So we have weekly news for IT as well as technical nuggets for you to learn.
Yeah, we're putting out stuff on Channel 9 like this every week. The WindowsAzure.com portals, we're adding a lot more things around architecture and kind of developer-centric content, scenario-driven stuff. And I think everything else kind of tends, if you start there, the trail of breadcrumbs will lead you in all sorts of great directions.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thanks, everybody, for the questions.
Thanks.
Those were amazing. I saw these guys actually sweat. I didn't want to say anything. So it was good. Really appreciate the questions. And thank you all.
Thanks.